Learning Tekken on paper is one thing, but to be able to play and execute all the strategies that you have set in your mind can be a really big challenge. And it's common not to be able to think properly during a match just because there's so much going on at once. Alright, so I wouldn't worry too much of that because it can happen to even the most experienced players. The more you improve and the better you get, the faster pace the game is going to be. So in this week, I'll teach you a couple things that you can look out for during a match to help you make better decisions. In Tekken, it's common to have tunnel vision, and this is basically when a player is too determined on landing a certain attack or a strategy. They become so focused on just achieving that one goal and aren't really considering or noticing anything else. In some instances, this can go on for entire rounds and even through several matches. The reason why tunnel vision is bad is because things are always changing in a round of Tekken. Your decisions should be made based on what's actually happening in the match as it unfolds. And since situations are always changing, the best move to make is constantly changing as well. One basic example of situations changing quickly can be when you decide to go for a combo on your opponent. And before landing your launcher, you and your opponent were probably spaced out at the mid-range, both looking to just land that first hit. This counts as one situation. You're both in a neutral position, using movement, trying to set up for the perfect attack. The next situation comes after you've launched the opponent. With the enemy in the air and little time to react, your focus shifts to execution. The goal becomes trying to perform your combo without messing it up. And while you're going for that combo, you can start thinking about your next move. As you may have learned by now, landing knockdowns and combos aren't just good for damage. They can also put you in a position to apply more pressure on a recovering opponent. After a combo, you can mix your opponent up using either a mid or a low attack, and they'll have to predict which option you're going for. And this is obviously a great situation to be in, so you need to try and recognize these opportunities as well. So between trying to launch the opponent, performing your combo, and applying pressure afterwards, you're putting yourself into 3 different situations in just a short amount of time. And simply being aware of what's going on in a match can do wonders for helping you think more like a Tekken player. That way, you can always stay one step ahead of the opponent. Alright guys, now keep in mind that what I just described is only one basic example of the way things can change quickly during a match. And the more you play, the better you're going to get at picking out the right attacks for all the different situations. You'll also be able to recognize more and more specific situations as you improve. Another big factor that can control both you and your opponent's decisions that I think often gets overlooked are the life bars. And if you aren't already doing so, make sure you're taking note of the current health advantages as well as disadvantages at all times. Now, even if you hold just a small life lead, you have a huge advantage over your opponent. They're the ones who has to find a way to deal damage and catch up. So they're likely going to be concerned with getting close to you to start some attacks. And if you know this information beforehand, you can be ready to pick a strategy to counter. The larger your life lead becomes, the easier it is to think about your options. You're the one in the driver's seat, whereas your opponent can't really afford to make many more mistakes before they get KO'd. And the most obvious way to make comebacks is to land a huge damage combo, and that's the main thing you're going to want to look out for. The player who's down big on health not only has to find a way to secure a big comeback, but still find a way to do so without losing all their health, and that's a lot of pressure on them to think about. Using the life bar to weigh out all the possible options is a very advanced technique that comes with experience. You want to try to get familiar with your attacks and how much damage they deal on the enemy life bar early on. This will greatly improve your decision making since you're going to be able to throw out all your attacks more quickly and confidently. Alright guys, now even though this week's lesson is the shortest in length, you could argue that it's the hardest one to work on in practice. Being able to recognize all the different situations that take place and respond perfectly with your gameplay requires a lot of dedication and practice. And it might even require you to think about your game outside of when you're actually playing it. So with that said, let's take a look at this week's homework. Tekken is more strategic than many people give it credit for. Don't be surprised to find out that it's really hard to think like a Tekken player. Now that you know what you should be thinking about during a match, it's time to get into your opponent's head. Next week, we'll tie together everything you've learned to figure out the key to outplaying your opponents. Now guys, don't forget that if you need to rewatch any part of this lesson or a previous lesson, feel free to do so. In fact, I actually recommend it because you can often pick up things that you missed watching it the first time around. We're also going to be covering this week's topics a little bit more in depth on my upcoming Twitch stream, so be sure to look forward to that as well. And also, in the meantime, if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to tweet at me at TK_Anakin. I'm always happy to answer your questions. So until next week, guys, the final week of the lesson, everybody take care. I'll see you then. Peace.